And a very happy Wednesday evening to you all. Hi, I'm Gary, ham radio call sign W4EEY, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee in phonetics. And we're going to talk about ham radio, specifically getting your first ham radio license. If you've just stumbled across this video on YouTube, please look for the Technician Class playlist and go back to the first chapter, our first video, so that you can go sequentially and it'll make sense. We're almost done with the class. We're here up to Chapter 7, and when I talk about chapters, I move my table back here. This is the book we use, the American Radio Relay League License Manual for the Technician Class. This is the 5th edition. And it's got all of the questions and answers in the back, and we go chapter by chapter each week. And so we are doing licensing regulations tonight, Bruce. Yeah, perfect. This is our schedule up and coming tonight, the 19th of March. We have the licensing regulations. Then next week we'll do operating regulations. Then we'll go through the last chapter on April the 2nd, and that is safety, and then we'll also be taking a practice test at that time. So let me just mute that so we get less noise coming through. And then finally, we'll take some practice tests again, more practice tests together, and our last class then is on April the 9th. So everybody is doing great. I'd like you to consider, where and when you're going to be taking your test. You can use Google to find a local amateur radio club in your area. Taking your technician class in person is probably the easiest thing to do the first time out. You can also go to hamstudy.org/sessions, put your zip code in there, and it'll tell you where test sessions are going to be in your area. And then there's also the ARRL Find a Club and Find an Amateur Radio License Exam Session URLs here. Lots of resources for you. This is what Ham Study looks like. We also want you to, if you haven't already, and it's discussed, I believe, in the book, but to obtain a federal registry number, an FRN number. Back in the day, not too long ago, like 2-3 years ago, you used to be able to use your Social Security number, but now they require you to first get this number from the FCC. It's free, and the long URL down at the bottom is a link to the FCC's instructions of how to do it. And then also we were talking earlier before class about practice tests. We want you to take practice tests, and we recommend the American Radio Relay League's exam review website. It's free, and you can take practice tests there. You can also use hamstudy.org. QRZ.com, I think, has practice tests. You should be taking probably a dozen to 15 practice tests before you take your real test. That way it accustoms you to the questions and the answers. You find your strengths and weaknesses. The whole thing, we're just trying to get you ready so that you can get your amateur radio license. So tonight we're going to talk about Chapter 7, Licensing Regulations. Then we're going to take a 5-minute break. And then bravely, I'm going to try to see if we can make some off-the-cuff contacts on VHF, UHF first, and then on HF as well. So you get a chance to hear that. And then we'll be done for tonight. We'll get you out early tonight, and so you can enjoy the evening. Oh, and I'm in short sleeves tonight. Normally I'm not, because the studio is so cold, except our air conditioning conked out. So it won't be fixed until Friday. So we have fans running, if you hear those in the background, and the windows open. So you may hear my dogs barking as well. All right, let's get started. Know that amateur radio is an official class of service as designated by the FCC. It's not business band radio, it's non-commercial voluntary communications of persons who are interested in radio technique solely with a personal aim, and then my favorite word, and without pecuniary interest. You can't make money off of your ham radio license. You can't send messages for money, all right? And amateur radio enhances international goodwill. And something that we do, you didn't know you're an artist, but we enhance, we contribute to the advancement of the radio art. It's in the regulations, that's what it says, so that's what we do. And the regulations are Part 97, that's the amateur radio regulations of the FCC. It sets the frequency bands, it sets the privileges of the different license classes. It tells how to issue vanity call signs, special event call signs. They coordinates U.S. interests with the ITU on a regulatory basis. And one thing that you need to know, the FCC may inspect an amateur station at any time. Now, will they knock on your door at midnight? Not likely. Not in this environment right now. They're already understaffed. But know that they have that authority if the station was being used for adverse purposes, let's say. How many licenses can a person have? Only one license per person, but when you get your license from the FCC, you get 2 licenses. What? You get a station license, which allows you to build your amateur radio station at your house, and you get an operator's license, which allows you to operate your station and other amateur radio stations. So two licenses in one, but only one per person. And if you like to read, here's the URL for the American Radio Relay League's PDF of the Part 97. They keep it up to date, so it's always good to have it available there if you have questions. It is written in governmentese, so it might put you to sleep. It used to be that we wanted to make sure that you had your mailing address up to date with the FCC. Well, now it's your email address. The wrong mailing address or the wrong email address can lead to revocation of your license if they can't contact you. So you always want to keep your information current. So if you're going to be making a move, make sure you go online to the FCC Universal Licensing System website and put in the changes. It shouldn't cost you anything, but it's important because otherwise you could lose your license. Correct email must be maintained. The term of an amateur radio license in the United States is 10 years. There is a grace period if you let your license lapse, if you totally forgot. You've got 2 years within which you can go online and renew your license with the FCC. You just can't transmit until you get your new authorization from the FCC. But the grace period is 2 years. After 2 years, you're going to have to go back and take the technician test again. There is the Universal Licensing System database, and when you appear in the database, then you are a licensed ham. It used to be back in the day, novice licensees. I got my first novice license in 1969. We used to wait for a letter from the FCC, that envelope that had the official seal. I waited for 6 weeks after I took my first test before I got my license. It was a great day. Nowadays, depending on the volunteer examiners that you're using, you can get your license within 3 days if they submit everything electronically. So it's much faster now. You have that federal registry number that I talked about that replaces your Social Security number. And if you'd like to, with a group of your friends, get a club station started, you can get a club station license. You can get a call sign for the club station. You must have 4 or more members in the club, however, to be trustees for the license. So that's the rule, 4 members. And this is what the Universal Licensing System website looks like. This is where you make all of these changes. The license is not free. It's, I think, about $35 from the FCC, and they'll tell you how you can make that payment after your licensing information goes to the FCC. And your volunteer examiners will tell you more about that process as well. But just remember, the FCC is the radio sheriff. They're the ultimate authority. So I mentioned back in the day I got my novice license. That was a class of license that was issued by the FCC. It's no longer available. You can't get a novice license. However, there are people who have their novice licenses and have renewed them every 10 years. And so there are still novice license holders who are hams. Their frequency restrictions are very restricted, however, as to what they can do. Nowadays, there are 3 classes of licenses available. The technician, which is what we're studying for. Then the intermediate license is the general class. And then the top license in the United States is the amateur extra. Novice, conditional, Tech Plus, and advanced, those were previous classes of ham licenses that some people still have been able to retain, for example. Okay, let's go for some questions. You can go ahead and unmute and tell me what you think. Which of the following is part of the basis and purpose of the amateur radio service?
C.
C is correct. Advancing skills in the technical and communication phases of the radio art. And which agency regulates and enforces the rules for the amateur radio service?
C. Charlie.
Yep. The Federal Candy Company. No, FCC, Federal Communications Commission. How many operator primary station license grants may be held by any one person?
A.
Yep, 1 per person. And what proves that the FCC has issued an operator or primary license grant? We used to get it in the mail. Yeah, we don't get it in the mail anymore. We have to appear in the database. So the license appears in the FCC database. You'll also get an email. And for which license classes are new licenses currently available from the FCC?
D.
Delta.
Yeah, technician, general, and amateur extra. And what may happen if the FCC is unable to reach you by email?
Bravo.
Yes, revocation of your station license and suspension of your operator license. Two licenses in one. So which of the following can result in revocation of the station license or suspension of the operator license? They ask them in different ways.
Bravo.
Yeah, failure to provide and maintain a correct email address with the FCC. You're not going to get both of those questions on your test, but you might get one or the other. So what is the normal term for an FCC-issued amateur radio license?
Charlie.
They're good for 10 years, which is a pretty good bargain for $35. You pay $3.50 a year. And what is the grace period for renewal of an amateur, if an amateur license expires?
Alpha.
Yeah, 2 years. 2 years grace. And how soon after passing the exam for your first license may you transmit on the amateur radio bands?
Charlie.
As soon as you're in the database rules all. All right, if your license has expired and is still within the allowable grace period, may you continue to transmit on the amateur radio bands?
No. Delta.
Delta.
Nope, you cannot. You must wait until the license has been renewed and appears in the database. And when must the station and its records be available for FCC inspection?
B. Bravo.
Yes, at any time. And which of the following is a requirement for the issuance of a club station?
Bravo.
B. Bravo, yeah.
It must be 4 members. All right, very good. Moving on to section 7.2, bands and privileges. We've already looked at the color chart, which is the American Radio Relay League's printout of the FCC band allocations. These are the bands that amateur radio operators in the United States can use. But beyond the band plans, or beyond the frequency allocations are band plans. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody here because we've got some noise going on. Whoops, but I lost my cursor. There we go. All right. So band plans are gentlemen's agreements that tell you where you might find signals within these frequencies. So if you're looking for single sideband voice, the band plans will tell you where those signals might be, or data signals. And all of the band plans are available at the American Radio Relay League website. So you can download them or look at them to check them out. And so it's always nice to know that you're in the right neighborhood, so to speak, when you want to transmit. And note that for local communications via amateur radio repeaters, those repeaters, when they're first established, they're coordinated by local frequency coordinators, regional coordinators. And for us here in South Carolina, it's the Southeastern Repeater Association. They're the ones that are the frequency coordinators, and will tell you if you wanted to put on a new repeater, okay, they'd say, okay, for your area, this frequency pair might be available, because you don't want to randomly just put a repeater up. If you do, then you might have to take it down if it's interfering with somebody else. Speaking of interfering with somebody else, some of the bands that we use, the 70 centimeter UHF band, among others, are shared bands. And when hams have a secondary allocation in these shared bands, they must protect the primary users. So if you're on your ham radio and you hear another communication going on, assume that they're the primary users and don't interfere with them. Don't tell them to get out because you're secondary. What you have to do is use the big knob or change your frequency to move off to a different spot. We especially want to make sure that we don't interfere with radio location or radio navigation signals. And here's that color chart again. Now, we ask, can techs use single sideband on HF? Come back to me just for a second, Bruce. Here on the color chart, oh, my big hand is over it. There's a legend over here. And you notice in the legend it's green. That green is for phone. And so if you look then on the 10-meter band, is there a green in the 10-meter band? Yes, and it's where text can transmit. So there is a region from 28.3 to 28.5 megahertz where technician licensees can use single sideband voice on the 10-meter band. And because it's above 9 megahertz by convention, you'll be using upper sideband. That way people will expect that and be able to talk with you. If you use lower sideband, nobody will understand you and they won't talk to you. And if you want to remember the relationship between frequency and wavelength, remember our circle or pyramid, 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz will give you the wavelength in meters, or 300 divided by the wavelength in meters will give you the frequency in megahertz. So for the technician class, the restrictions are for the HF bands. For 80 meters, 40 meters, and 50 meters, there are some small frequencies that are allocated for use by novices and technician operators for Morse code only, CW only. Now on 10 meters, as we just mentioned, the subband there, you can use Morse code, you can use radio teletype, you can use data like FT8, and you can use single sideband voice. Above 50 megahertz with a technician class license, there really are no restrictions. Technicians have full privileges. The only bands that are divided in any way are 6 meters, 2 meters, and 1.25 meters, or 220 megahertz. Both 6 and 2 meters have small Morse code only subbands at the very low end of the band. So that's 6 and 2. And the 1.25 meter band has a restriction here between 219 and 220, which is set aside for data signals for fixed message forwarding. Those are the only restrictions for 50 megahertz or VHF and above. So just remember, the bottom of 6 and 2 meters, Morse code only, and the bottom of the 1.25 meter band, data signals only. On the HF bands, 80, 40, 15, and 10, technician class operators are limited to a maximum of 200 watts output. And you can work the world with 200 watts, especially with the sunspot numbers being what they are right now. Above 10 meters, 50 megahertz and up, you can use the full legal limit of amateur radio power, 1,500 watts. And we're going to try to demonstrate tonight, but when you're on the HF bands, and you're going to maybe call CQ, you're going to pick a frequency, all right? The first thing you do, and we'll do it tonight, listen, listen, listen. Then you will ask, is the frequency in use? Listen to see if anybody comes back to you. And also use the frequency chart over here that we showed, the ARRL color chart, to make sure that you're in your assigned frequency range. I put that little frequency counter there because 27 megahertz is a CB frequency. That's not amateur radio, so that's no good. So,
Gary, if you don't mind, I got a question.
yes, please, come on.
70 centimeter band you said was secondary for text. How do we know whether to give way to if somebody's primary or not? Do we ask them?
No, you don't communicate
No?
with them at all. You assume they are primary and you move.
Okay.
You're not going to run into that very often at all. The 70 centimeter band up toward Michigan, where I came from, there were services being used by the Canadians and whatnot. We had to give way to them there. The 60 meter band, I believe, is a shared band. 30 meters also might be a shared band. So you'll know it when you hear them, and just move off, just ignore them.
Okay.
So how do you know if a band is open? Well, you can use what they call DX spotting websites, and this is one that I frequent, dxheat.com/DXC. And you can, with your web browser, go to this URL, and it'll show you stations that are on the air at this time. It's in real time. It'll show you the frequencies. It'll tell you the countries where they're from, the modes that they're operating in. You can put filters on it so that you can only look for certain types of signals if you want. It'll tell you how propagation is, solar weather on indicators here. It's got a real-time clock for UTC time, and you can actually look up stations by call sign to see if they've been spotted recently. So that's one way to know that the band is open. Another is that you can listen for Morse code beacons. The Northern California DX Foundation and the International Amateur Radio Union have set up 100-watt Morse code beacon stations around the world. This is only a partial list. And they're on all of the bands, and so you can listen for them and see if you can hear them. Now, that requires you to know some Morse code, so that might not be practical for you in getting started. Another thing you can do is to check some of the online resources like PSK Reporter is one, and WhisperNet. These two will tell you about how radio signals are propagating around the world at this time. Here's some more questions. So what is the FCC Part 97 definition of a beacon? What do you think?
Delta.
It's what the Northern California DX Foundation and the IARU has set up. It's an amateur station transmitting communications for the purposes of observing propagation or related experimental activities. And they're automated stations, so there's nobody there. Which of the following entities recommends transmit-receive channels and other parameters for repeater stations?
Bravo.
Yeah, here it's the Southeastern Repeater Association. They're the volunteer frequency coordinator that are recognized by local amateurs. And who selects a frequency coordinator? I didn't tell you, but you might be able to guess it.
Sue?
Yes, amateur operators in the region whose stations are eligible to be repeaters, they vote, they select the person or group that's going to be the frequency coordinator. So which of the following frequency ranges are available for phone single sideband operation by technician licensees?
Charlie.
So note they're all in the 10-meter band, but we specifically said between 28.3 and 28.5 megahertz. That's where technicians have privileges on the 10-meter band. And which frequency is in the 6-meter amateur band? You can't bring your color chart to the test session. But yes, 52 megahertz is in the 6-meter amateur band. 300 divided by 6 gives you 50, and in this case 52 is not the closest to 50, but the 6-meter band starts at 50 megahertz. So you can check the color chart. Which amateur band includes 146.52 megahertz?
2 meters.
2 meters. It's the national calling frequency for FM, 146.52, 2 meters. And how may amateurs use the 219 to 220 megahertz segment of the 1.25 meter band?
Delta.
Yeah, the restriction there is for fixed digital message forwarding only. So you're not likely going to be using that, but folks who are using WinLink email over amateur radio, they might be using it. So on which HF bands does a technician class operator have phone privileges?
Bravo. B.
For HF bands, there's only one, and that's the 10-meter band, in that segment between 28.3 and 28.5 megahertz. So which of the following VHF UHF band segments are limited to CW only?
A alpha.
We said it's at the very bottom of the 6-meter band and the very bottom of the 2-meter band, and that's, yep, you got it. 50.0 to 50.1 and 144.0 to 144.1. So how are U.S. amateurs restricted in segments of bands where the amateur radio service is secondary?
Alpha.
Yeah, U.S. amateurs may find non-amateur stations in those segments and must avoid interfering with them. So what is the maximum peak envelope power output for technician class operators in their HF band segments? How many light?
HF is 200.
Two light bulbs, of the old light bulbs, yeah, 200 watts. And except for some specific restrictions, what is the maximum peak envelope power for technician class operators using frequencies above 30 megahertz?
D delta.
Yeah, 1,500 watts, or 15 of the old light bulbs. You're doing great. All right, international rules. The International Telecommunications Union, they're based in Geneva, Switzerland. They're an arm of the United Nations, and they are the top civilian coordinator for civilian telecommunications activities around the world. Military organizations have their own, but ITU is the world governing body for telecommunications in the world. And they've divided the Earth into 3 regions, and since they're based in Switzerland, they put themselves in Region 1, which covers Europe and Africa. And we follow the sun. Region 2 is North America, Central America, South America. And then Region C, Australia, Asia, the Pacific region, Region 3. So these are the 3 main ITU regions. They also have ITU zones, which are really not important to us, but I just want to make sure that you're aware that they do exist. They're used sometimes in contests, the IARU contest in July, for example. So
It's different than the call sign one.
Yes, it is. They don't correspond to the U.S. Numbering organization. That's their own system. So the reason I mentioned those three regions, Region 1, Region 2, Region 3, is that the frequency allocations for ham radio stations may be different in some of the ITU regions. The frequency allocations in Europe, for example, for the 40-meter band, they can transmit single sideband voice way down low, where we can only transmit Morse code, which gives some interesting problems during contests. And so what happens is the Europeans will transmit single sideband voice very low in the 40-meter band, but listen up in the American US band high. So it's what we call a wide split. So different things happen like that because of the ITU regions. And some U.S. territories like Guam, the Mariana Islands, those are outside of Region 2. They're actually in Region 3. So they have different allocations. And other radio services may share amateur frequencies in those regions, and amateurs may be secondary users in those regions. So just be aware of that if you're going to be making international transmissions, and that these things exist. And to operate in a foreign country, it must be authorized by that country. Now, there are international treaties between, for example, the United States and Europe, which with the proper documentation, you can use your amateur radio license, your U.S. license in Europe. It's called the CEPT agreement. We're not going to go into it here. We do that in the general and the extra class. In international waters, on a U.S. flag vessel, note that's important, U.S. licensed amateurs may operate, but the location's ITU region frequency allocations then apply. So if you're on a U.S. flag vessel, but you're in the Pacific, well, you're in ITU region 3, so you have to be cognizant of the differences on some of the bands. But you could use the different, because you have to correspond with what's going on in that region. And if you are going to be operating an amateur radio station, permitted communications are those that are incidental to the purposes of the amateur radio service and remarks of a personal nature. You can't use it for business applications or other things like that. Prohibited communications can occur when countries inform the ITU that amateur radio communications are prohibited with their country. At the moment, there are no prohibitions. U.S. amateur radio operators may contact any amateur radio station anywhere in the world. And as we mentioned, the U.S. flag vessel in international waters, you can operate with an FCC license with the permission of the captain, or on aircraft with permission of the pilot. You don't have any authority beyond that. So you always have to get the permission. So I mentioned there are no countries right now that prohibit communications. It used to be that there were 2 countries that nobody had worked in a long time. One of those was Yemen, and the other was North Korea. Well, there's recently been some ham radio de-expeditioners who have operated out of Yemen. So that has broken that barrier. And years ago, it was possible for amateur radio operators to operate out of North Korea, but certainly not recently. The last expedition went there was a Polish amateur radio operator who was able to operate for exactly 1 hour using single sideband, and he worked about 200 stations in Europe, and then he was forced to shut down. There are no local North Koreans who are amateur radio operators. But back in the day, amateur radio licenses were listed, and here's one of the famous ones, P51BH, which Marty Lane from Finland. Marty was worked for a Nokia, the cell phone company, and he was in North Korea putting in cell phone systems for their posts and telecommunications. And because of that, and because of his contacts with the ministry, they allowed him to have a ham radio license in North Korea. And you'll hear Marty on the air now from various de-expeditions. He's still going strong, and I had the great opportunity I was at the ham radio convention in Friedrichshafen, Germany, and I was at the airport getting ready to board a flight back to Frankfurt, and who should walk into the waiting room but Marty Lane. Here's my photo to prove it. I love this hobby because you get a chance to meet your heroes at ham fests or thereabouts. So he's one of the good ones. All right, let's answer some questions. What types of international communications are an FCC licensed amateur radio station permitted to make?
Alpha?
Yeah, communications incidental to the purposes of the amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character. And from which of the following locations may an FCC licensed amateur station transmit?
Delta.
Yes, on the ship. From any vessel or craft located in international waters and documented or registered in the U.S. With which countries are FCC licensed amateur radio stations prohibited from exchanging communications?
Alpha.
Yeah, any country whose administration has notified the ITU that it objects. All right, here's one you're going to be interested in, call signs. Oh shoot, and I forgot to look up what the current allocation is here in the foreland, but amateur radio call signs, all in the United States, have a prefix and a suffix separated by a region number. So my call sign, for example, is W, then the region number 4, then EEY. Now, some people would say that W4 is the prefix and EEY is the suffix. Okay, I'm okay with that. Note that shorter call signs are sought after because, especially if you're going to be making DX contacts and contesting, short call signs get through. So they are restricted and limited to amateur extra class operators. New hams will either get what we call 2x3 call signs. That's 2 letters and 3 letters separated by the region number, or they can get 1x3s. So, and your first call sign, you can't pick it. Your first call sign will be assigned sequentially by the FCC. Now, after you get your license, then you can go back to that FCC ULS website and apply for a vanity call sign, one that you pick, one that you might be able to remember. But it's all based on your class of license as to what's available to you. And if you wanted to find out what license, what call signs are available, I recommend this website, AE7Q. He's up to date on all of the call signs. This is what I forgot to check today, as to what the most recently issued call signs were in your region. And also then if you can look up by call sign to see if it's already been issued to somebody else. And if it hasn't, then you can apply for it. And again, technician, vanity call signs, you can see in the book, you can apply for groups C and D, which are 1x3s, like my call sign is a 1x3, or 2x3 call signs. This is no good, that's got 4 letters. That's just an example. And club station vanity call signs. Only the listed trustee of the club may apply for a new vanity call sign for a club. And remember, we said before, a club must have 4 members, at least 4 members. And as you're listening on the air and you're hearing on the HF bands, you'll run across some 1x1 call signs. Whiskey 6 Alpha, Whiskey 6 Bravo, Whiskey 6 Charlie. These are used for special events. And they're issued by the FCC for just a brief period of time. So Route 66, all along the route, they had a series of stations, and they're going to come back in September of 2025 with their special event stations. So if you have your license by then and they're on 10 meters in your band segment, you can work them. Here's some more questions. So who may select a desired call sign under the vanity call sign rules?
Delta.
Yeah, any licensed amateur can do it. Now, what call sign is available to you might be based on your class of license. So which of the following is a valid technician class call sign format?
Alpha.
Alpha.
Yeah, that's a 2x3 call sign. The others are 2x1s or 1x2s. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of chapter 7. So what I'd like to do right now is we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll see if we can make some contacts briefly, and then we'll get done for the night. we're back. And I'm going to actually move us over to the green screen. I didn't tell Bruce I was going to do this, so follow me. Might be a little easier. All right, here we are. So what I've got here is a standard VHF UHF HT, but notice the antenna that I've got on it right now. This is the antenna that would probably come with the radio. Notice the difference. These are gain antennas. They're not so easy if you want to put these in your pocket, but for better range, you can find them from, I believe this is a Diamond. Nagoya also sells them. So these gain antennas for VHF and UHF are highly recommended. And I have the radio programmed to one of the local UHF repeaters here in Anderson County. Now I have no idea if anybody is listening at the moment, but we're going to take a shot at it. Now, what you do is I've had the radio on here and I've been listening and there's no one on the repeater. So what I'm going to do is, as I've described to you before, I'm just going to throw my call sign out and see if anybody comes back. And then I may make an announcement that I'd like somebody to come back. Whiskey 4, Echo, Echo, Yankee. So you heard that squelch tail there. That meant that I was getting into the repeater.
N4ART, repeater.
So that was the repeater identification that was identifying himself. Automated. Wonder if anyone might be on frequency for a demonstration of amateur radio. Here is Whiskey 4, Echo, Echo, Yankee. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. It's like fishing. Sometimes you put your hook in the water, and sometimes you get a fish, sometimes not. I'll try one more time. This is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. I'll get my call right. Looking for someone who might come back for a demonstration of amateur radio, please. This is not.
And I'm located in Walhalla for your demo. Echo, Echo, Yankee. I didn't get the prefix.
Yeah, hi Mike. Thank you very much for coming back. The call is Whiskey 4, Washington 4, Echo, Echo, Yankee. QTH is in Pendleton, South Carolina. And I'm teaching an amateur radio class and just wanted to demonstrate the use of a radio repeater. Over.
Gary, well, good deal. Well, good luck on the class, and say hello to your class attendees there, and if they get a tenth out of the hobby that I have, they will have a hobby for the rest of their life and enjoy it immensely. Go ahead.
Well, Mike, yes, I feel the same way. That's one of the reasons that I teach the classes. And in this day and age, I actually teach live on Zoom and also with a YouTube live stream. So I will be sending, if your email is on QRZ, I'll send you an email with a link to the video and you can listen to yourself.
Yeah, I'm familiar with your YouTube channel and your classes. You guys do an excellent job at it, and keep up the good work, and send a word of encouragement there to your folks in the class, and we hope to hear them on the air later on. And if any of them are in the Seneca area, they can test the first Saturday of every month in Seneca. Go ahead.
Yeah, Roger, Mike, appreciate that, and I will pass that information along, and you have a great evening tonight, and we'll talk to you on down the log. 73 from Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee.
Very, very good. Well, 73, and have fun. And I am good on QRZ. This is November 9, Golf Sierra X-Ray 73.
So that's a contact on the UHF repeater here in the upstate of South Carolina. So that's one demonstration. You'll be able to do this very thing when you get your amateur radio license and have your radio programmed to the proper frequencies and offsets, which your local ham club can help you get the radio programmed. All right, now let's move over back to the pod, and we'll see if we can do something similar on HF. And for this, I have to put on my headphones so that I can hear what you're hearing. And Bruce, if you would put on the multi, please. So here we are on the 20-meter band. I looked on 10 meters earlier, but the propagation wasn't great. This is a Flex 6600 radio. We're set up on 14.195 on the 20-meter band. I'm connected to a DX Commander Classic vertical antenna, and we've been listening here. I'm going to bring the volume up a little bit. We're not hearing anybody. Let's ask. Is the frequency in use? Is the frequency in use, please? Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Is the frequency in use? Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. CQ, CQ, CQ. CQ, CQ, CQ. Here is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, W4EEY, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee calling CQ20, CQ20 for a demonstration of amateur radio. Here is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, W4EEY, and listening. CQ20, CQ20, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, W4EEY, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, calling CQ20, 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 from Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee for a demonstration of amateur radio, please. Here is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. See the signals above and below us there. Noise went down a little bit. We're transmitting with 100 watts. One more time. CQ20, CQ20, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, W4EEY for a demonstration of amateur radio. Here is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee calling CQ20 and bye. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But that's calling CQ on single sideband, very similar with the Morse code. You'd send the letters CQ and QRL to see if the frequency is in use and all of that. But that's what we wanted to try. We'll do it again next week, I think. Maybe we'll have better luck, or maybe I can prearrange something. Anyway, any questions before we go tonight? Let me go ahead and turn off the spotlight on me so I can see you guys a little better in the Zoom classroom. Questions? Alrighty. So next week, Chapter 8, Operating Regulations. It'll be another short class like tonight, and we'll see what we can do with another demonstration. I'm hoping for a new radio to be coming in with Yaesu Fusion. I'd like to demonstrate that to you as well. But until next week then, 73. See you next time.
73.
73.